Happy Tuesday. I am so excited to continue to read Flat Stanley with you today. Today for morning meeting, we are going to talk about, I had it in my head and I just forgot it. Oh, I remember. We are going to talk about our favorite thing about school and our favorite thing about our home. Because I know a lot of us are missing school, and it's okay to miss school, but all of us are at home, and it's important to remember the things that you miss, but also to be grateful in the place that you are now. So your favorite thing about school and your favorite thing about your house. My favorite thing about school is seeing all of you and seeing all of my other teacher friends and just being with people that I really like you. My favorite thing about my home is that Remy is there or here. He's in his crate right now because he was just a little too crazy this morning. But sorry, I keep looking. There's a really pretty bird outside, so that's why I'm like, but yes, Remy is there. Sorry, I'll stop looking at the bird. Remy is here, and that's my favorite thing about my home. So I guess my favorite thing about school or our classroom is the people I share it with, and my favorite thing about my home is the dog I share it with. Yeah, so we are going to get started reading chapter 2 of Flat Stanley by Jeff Brown. There's 5 chapters, so we will read a chapter a day, and we will finish on Friday when you are going to take an AR test on it. And I'm excited to see you take an AR test on it, I guess. And the project with my flat teacher. If you want, you can go ahead and print it out and get started on it on Verge. It's in the ELA assignment, or the reading. And if you don't want to, then it will be mailed to you soon. Chapter 2. It's titled Being Flat. When Stanley got used to being flat, he enjoyed it. He could go in and out of rooms, even when the door was closed, just by lying down and sliding under through the crack at the bottom. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop said it was silly, but they were quite proud of him. That's a picture of him sliding under the door. Maybe Arthur's a little mad because he can't do it. So he was so flat he could fit under the bottom of the door. Arthur got jealous and tried to slide under a door, but he just banged his head. Being flat could also be helpful, Stanley found. He was taking a walk with Mrs. Lambchop one afternoon when her favorite ring fell from her finger. The ring rolled across the sidewalk and down between the bars of a grating that covered a deep, dark shaft. Mrs. Lambchop began to cry. I have an idea, Stanley said. He took the laces out of his shoes and an extra pair out of his pocket and tied them all together to make one long lace. Then he tied one end of that to the back of his belt and gave the end to his mother. Oh, so he could fit through the grates on the ground to go get his mother's ring. Lower me, he said, and I'll look for the ring. Thank you, Stanley, Mrs. Lambchop said. She lowered him between the bars and moved him carefully up and down from side to side so that he could search the whole floor of the shaft. 2 policemen came by and stared at Mrs. Lambchop as she stood holding the long lace that ran down through the grating. She pretended not to notice them. What's the matter, lady? The first policeman asked. Is your yo-yo stuck? I am not playing with a yo-yo, Mrs. Lambchop said sharply. My son is at the other end of this lace, if you should know. Get the net, Harry, said the second policeman. There's the policeman with Mrs. Lambchop. Get the net, Harry, said the second policeman. We have caught a cuckoo. Just then, down in the shaft, Stanley cried out, "Hooray!" Mrs. Lambchop pulled him up and saw that he had the ring. "Good for you, Stanley," she said. Then she turned angrily to the policeman. "Indeed," she said, "shame." The policeman apologized. "We didn't get it, lady," they said. "We have been hasty. We see that now." "People should think twice before making rude remarks," said Mrs. Lambchop, "and then not make them at all." The policeman realized that was a good rule, and they said they would try to remember it. There's Stanley coming out of the grate. One day, Stanley got a letter from his friend, Thomas Anthony Jeffrey, whose family had moved recently to California. A school vacation was about to begin, and Stanley was invited to spend it with the Jeffreys. "Oh boy," Stanley said, "I would love to go." Mr. Lambchop sighed. "A round-trip train or airplane ticket to California is very expensive," he said. "I will have to think of some cheaper way." When Mr. Lambchop came home from the office that evening, he brought with him an enormous brown paper envelope. "Now then, Stanley," he said, "try this for size." The envelope fit Stanley very well. There's Stanley getting, he's so flat, he's getting in the envelope. There was even room left over, Mrs. Lambchop discovered, for an egg salad sandwich made with thin bread and a toothbrush case filled with milk. They had to put a great many stamps on the envelope to pay for both airmail and insurance, but it was still much less expensive than a train or an airplane ticket to California. You just put them in an envelope and shipped them to California. The next day, Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop slid Stanley into his envelope, along with the egg salad sandwich and the toothbrush case full of milk, and mailed him from the box on the corner. The envelope had to be folded to fit through the slot, but Stanley was a limber boy, and inside the box he straightened right up again. There they are, putting Stanley in the mailbox, saying goodbye. What if your mom and dad did that to you? Mrs. Lambchop was nervous because Stanley had never been away from home alone before. She rapped on the box. "Can you hear me, dear?" she called. "Are you all right?" Stanley's voice came quite clearly. "I'm fine. Can I eat my sandwich now?" "Wait an hour and try not to get overheated, dear," Mrs. Lambchop said. Then she and Mr. Lambchop cried out, "Goodbye, goodbye," and went home. Stanley had a fine time in California. When the visit was over, the Jeffreys returned him in a beautiful white envelope they had made themselves. It had red and blue markings to show that it was airmail, and Thomas Jeffrey had lettered it "valuable" and "fragile," and this end up on both sides. Back home, Stanley told his family that he had been handled so carefully he never felt a single bump. Mr. Lambchop said it proved that jet planes were wonderful, and so was the Postal Service, and that this was a great age in which to live. Stanley thought so too. That was a very silly chapter. All right. I will continue to read this to you tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday. Bye, guys.